Today, we're going to discuss the New York Islanders post-trade deadline reality, and it's not pretty. We've got that, plus a preview of both of this weekend's games coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
You're Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers, dating all the way back to 1972 until the modern era. So glad you could join us today to talk a little Islanders hockey. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Islanders' reality post-trade deadline. We're going to update the latest injuries, and the Islanders are facing both of last year's Stanley Cup finalists this weekend in games. We'll preview both of them. After the trade of Brock Nelson, and I think it is universally or close to universally agreed upon by most Islander fans that Lou Lamorello did not do enough at the trade deadline to move out some of the veterans on bad or expiring contracts. But the Islanders already are facing a difficult reality, especially at forward, but really at defense as well. If you look at the forward situation right now, for example, the Islanders have absolutely no depth to speak of. And part of it is due to injuries. Mathew Barzal, obviously, out of the lineup, probably not going to play again this season. Don't see all that much of a need to play him again this season unless the Islanders go on some miraculous winning streak down the stretch and get back into the playoff picture. But, you know, their playoff odds right now are about 16-17% at best. But here's the deal. Tuesday night, the Islanders are in LA. They lose the game to the Kings 4-1. And Patrick Waugh basically was upset about Maxim Siplikov and a turnover he made that led to what became the game-winning goal. And the Kings scored that goal just 37 seconds after the Islanders tied the game at 1. Siplikov had the puck deep in his own zone, made a bad play. The turnover sets up the goal by Philip Deneau. Waugh is quoted as saying, Sippy had a horrible turnover, actually 2 on that same play, when we just scored and made it a 1-1 game. He needs to be better than that. And that is probably quite accurate. But here's the problem. The Islanders right now, after trading Brock Nelson and with the injury to Mathew Barzal, do not have any depth at forward right now. So there's going to be no accountability for the Islanders forwards when they have a bad game. And we saw Siplikov struggle and Waugh call him out and basically say, hey, not happy with the way that Siplikov played. And under normal circumstances on a team with a full roster, what would happen next is Siplikov would sit a game, maybe 2. Another Islanders player would fill in, and voila, Siplikov hopefully learns his lesson, and on we go. The Islanders are not in a position to do that right now. They are currently carrying 13 forwards, and the extra forward right now, the only guy on the roster, is Matt Martin. Matt Martin has played 4 games since December 15th. He has 1 point all season and has really not been a difference maker in a positive way for most of the year. And I don't like knocking Matt Martin. He's been a great Islander. But how much do the Islanders not have confidence in him? When Kyle McLean was out sick Sunday, the Islanders did not put Matt Martin into the lineup. They moved defenseman Adam Boqvist to center, and he'd never played center in the NHL before. So there's no depth here. And you look at the lineup right now, there are guys who probably, could also be sat down who are not going to get sat down for this very reason. You mentioned Siplikov. Kyle McLean has struggled most of the season. Hudson Fasching, playing a little better as of late. He has struggled most of the season. Pierre Engvall, most likely a buyout candidate right now for the New York Islanders this offseason. He has 5 years left after this season ends on his contract. And where are we at with him? 4 goals and 8 points in 44 games. He's been placed on waivers twice, and nobody has claimed him. My point is, there is just no depth here. And if you even go down to Bridgeport, you have a couple of guys who have, a little NHL experience. Liam Foudy played 2 games for the Islanders early this year. No points, but again, a serviceable stopgap guy, but not a difference maker at the NHL level. And again, I don't mean to be disrespecting any of these guys. They're giving their effort, but it just isn't there. Martin is viewed as a last resort. Could you call up Adam Beckman, who they just acquired in the minor league trade they made at the deadline in the Dennis Cholowski deal? Yeah, maybe give him a shot. Alex Jeffries, is he ready? Probably not, but, does it matter at this point? Do you give him a game or 2? Bottom line is, you don't have, not just at the NHL level, but depth-wise, you don't have a lot of guys ready to step in and give you much of anything. So what becomes the option? Well, you either can call up somebody. You could play Matt Martin if you want to go that route. And again, everydayers, you'll remember we discussed on yesterday's show the Islanders' failure to stick up for Boqvist after he got that questionable hit by Kevin Fiala, and nobody laid a finger on him. Maybe you put Matt Martin in the lineup in order to give the team a little toughness and physicality, which is something they've lacked. But it's not going to move the needle offensively. And how many minutes are you going to get from Matt Martin? 8, 7, 10 tops? It just does not seem to be that the Islanders are in a situation where they can do that and have a guy they're comfortable with who can contribute being inserted into the lineup when a guy in the lineup is struggling and maybe should sit for a game or 2. That's what accountability is. When you make a mistake, you learn from it because you pay for it, whether it's sitting out a game or a period or getting a lot less ice time. But they can't do that now. Now, the other option is you go 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, which is something they've done a few times. But I'm not so sure the Islanders will do that, especially if Boqvist is not available. And, if you don't have Adam Boqvist, So then you're down to 8 healthy defensemen that you could still play 7 of them and have 1 extra. But, again, having 7 defensemen and not playing the bottom 3, let's say, for very many minutes, there are benefits and drawbacks to that as well. Bottom line is that the way this team has been put together by Lou Lamorello, there just isn't enough organizational depth, and there aren't even enough players right now to really create a sense of accountability. And every team in this league needs accountability. So Siplikov almost certainly going to play Friday night. And if he makes 2 or 3 more mistakes like he did Tuesday, he's still probably going to play unless he gets hurt, because there just isn't enough talent here to have accountability on this roster. And we'll see what how the Islanders, Patrick Waugh and Lou Lamorello handle this situation. But again, we're faced with a team and an organization that needs to make some real fundamental changes to get younger, faster, more skilled, and there has to be more depth in this organization. There always should be 3 or 4 forwards, 2 or 3 defensemen who, if you need them for a game or 2 or 3, you can call them up and feel confident that you can plug them into the lineup and they'll get the job done. Well, the Islanders don't have that right now, and it's reflected in the standings and in the way they play the game. And it was a problem before the trade of Brock Nelson and the injury to Mathew Barzal, but it's a glaring problem now. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We'll have the latest injury updates, plus both of this weekend's games against the 2 teams that played for the Stanley Cup last year. And for our Islanders' birthday of the day, a big defenseman from Wisconsin who was with the Islanders for the 90-91 season. Let's see if you can guess who he is. We've got all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Trade Coffee. If you're like me, your mornings have to start with a good cup of coffee, but I got tired of settling for grocery store brands that just weren't cutting it. That's why I turned to Trade, and let me tell you, this coffee is next level. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the United States, bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. I took their quick quiz, and in under a minute, they matched me with a roast that was fresh, smelled incredible, and tasted even better. My first bag was a game changer. It had such a smooth, rich flavor, and I could actually taste the difference from my usual coffee. The subscription makes it so easy. No more last-minute grocery store runs or settling for whatever's on the shelf. And if you don't love your first bag, no worries. Trade will replace it for free until they get it just right. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. That's drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL for 40% off your first order. drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I got my eye on a few underdogs this year. Underdogs are always fun, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on, and the FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Again, FanDuel.com. Check it out today. So we talked about Boqvist and the fact that he did not return to the game against the Kings on Tuesday. Well, Adam Boqvist absent from practice Thursday for the New York Islanders. Now, as a result of his absence, Scott Mayfield out there skating with Ryan Pollock at practice. So it looks like Mayfield is going to be the guy they plug in if Boqvist is unable to play Friday night. And while the Islanders did not provide any updates, I would say it is looking more likely than not that we do not see Adam Boqvist in the lineup on Friday night. We'll see about Sunday. Not going to be easy. But again, the Islanders do have 9 defensemen. I think Mayfield makes sense because he is a right shot defenseman. And, again, the option for 11 forwards and 7 defensemen on Friday, it can make even more sense if you think about this. The Islanders could put Mike Riley back into the lineup. And if he's the 7th defenseman and he only plays 10, 12 minutes in the game, that's not a bad way to gradually integrate him back into the roster and as an active player without overdoing it right away. So I'm kind of leaning in that general direction if that is indeed the choice that the Islanders would have to make. Couple of little notes from around the NHL that I wanted to talk about. And, we're tentatively looking, as far as next season is concerned, at October 7th being the start of the season, with June 21st or 22nd, give or take, being a potential Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Now, remember, next year, we have an Olympic break, which is going to be even longer than the Four Nations break that we just saw this year. So there's going to be, and we've already been told about this, a lot more back-to-backs, 3 games in 4 nights. It is going to happen. And one other thing that they said, and remember, the schedule is usually released in June. They may even push it back to July this year when they try to figure this out. But there have been a couple of rumors that I at least wanted to mention. One of them is in 2026, 2027, that's when the new CBA needs to be ratified or the current one needs to be extended. There is actually some talk about extending the NHL season from 82 games to 84. I don't think we need 2 extra games. They would shorten the preseason to make up for it. I get why the owners would want to do it. The season is long enough at 82. Yeah, in the 90s at one point, the NHL did play a couple of 84-game seasons with 2 games being at neutral sites to try to, expand interest in the game. But again, not thrilled with adding 2 more games. And they also were thinking as a possibility of starting earlier, like late September, and still, going into late June, but allowing the games to be a little bit more spread out. So we'll keep an eye on that situation. Now, another thing that they're discussing, although it remains unlikely, but I have to mention it. There is a little bit of talk about possibly canceling next year's All-Star game. It would be held before the Winter Olympics. The NHL has not had an All-Star game and NHL players at the Olympics since 2002. And those Olympics were in Salt Lake City. So in 2006, 2010, 2014, no All-Star game. Yes, NHL players at the Olympics. After the success of Four Nations, is there any appetite left for an All-Star game? And I think the answer to that is no. I don't think the All-Star game would be a big draw. That, every dayers may remember we've talked about this around Four Nations, that the All-Star game is just passé at this point. Doesn't hold the same interest anymore in 2025 that it held in, let's say, the 80s, 70s, and earlier than that, when every game was not on TV, when it was harder to see all these star players play. The landscape in the sports world is different. But would the Islanders have this All-Star game, when they haven't hosted one since the early 80s, taken away from them? It's a rumor that has been described by The Athletic as highly unlikely. And I don't think it would happen. I think Islanders ownership has been promised this game, but it might also be the last All-Star game under the present format that we see for a long time, because the league has said, Four Nations, we want to do that every other year. If we do Four Nations Olympics, maybe that's 3 out of 4 years. And then where do you fit in an All-Star game? Or maybe you do Four Nations or some variation of it every year. I don't think they're going to cancel the All-Star game. Would I prefer if they did a Four Nations tournament and the Islanders were hosting some of those games over an All-Star game? Yes, but that's a whole different set of logistical issues, and it's not going to be next year because we already have the Olympics. So I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think this team is going to lose the All-Star game, but I'm just putting it out there that it's been mentioned, as has a potential change to the playoff format, maybe going back to 1 versus 8 in the conference. I think that's a worthwhile change, but we'll talk about that probably over the offseason. We have got more to get to on today's show. The Islanders face both teams that played in the Stanley Cup final last year this weekend. We'll preview both of those games and have our Islanders birthday of the day coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. But that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Islanders play 2 games this weekend, Friday against the Edmonton Oilers, Sunday against the Florida Panthers. Those just happen to be the 2 teams that played in the Stanley Cup final last year. Let's start with the Oilers. They come in, as of right now, 37-23-4. That places them in second place in the Pacific Division with 78 points. And they will not play on Thursday, so they will have a day off after playing the Devils on Thursday night. So it is a back-to-back right now for the Edmonton Oilers. Stuart Skinner is playing goal against New Jersey, so we probably see Calvin Pickard in goal for the Oilers. We avoid the starter, and that would be a positive. But look, Pickard, 15-7-0, a .276 goals against and an .896 save percentage. His numbers pretty close to Skinner's as far as save percentage and goals against average. We know the talent at the top of this Oilers lineup, the Connor McDavids, the Leon Draisaitls, the Evan Bouchards, the Zach Hymans, the Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. This is not an easy team to face, and their speed and skill is largely what you wish the Islanders would put out there on the ice. Connor McDavid centers Hopkins and Hyman on that top line. Draisaitl is the second line center with Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson flanking him. Adam Henrique is the third line pivot with Vasily Podkolzin and Connor Brown on his wings. And from left to right on the fourth line, Max Jones, Kasperi Kapanen, and Corey Perry. On defense, Jake Wallman and Evan Bouchard are the top pairing. Darnell Nurse and Troy Stetcher are the second pair. And then on the third pair, you've got Brent Kulak and Ty Emberson, the goalies, as I mentioned, Skinner and Pickard. Right now on IR, Evander Kane, Trent Frederick, Alec Regula. Day-to-day, Matthias Ekholm, John Klingberg, and Matthias Janmark. So we'll see if any of them are able to return to face the Islanders. This is a tough, skilled team. Then on Sunday, the Islanders will face the Florida Panthers. And again, not easy, but the good news is the Islanders will play Friday, have Saturday off. The Panthers will be visiting the Canadiens in Montreal on Saturday and then have to come down to face the Islanders on Sunday. Florida girding up for that Stanley Cup final defense, and they are a really good team. Whoever plays goal on Saturday the Islanders will face the other goalie. But again, we know the names at the top of this roster: Sam Reinhart, Alexander Barkov, Sam Bennett, Carter Verhaeghe. Aaron Ekblad suspended right now, so he's unavailable. But if you look, this is a more physical team perhaps than the Oilers. The line combinations: Barkov, Verhaeghe, and Reinhart. The top trio: Sam Bennett, Mackie Samskevich, and Evan Rodriguez are the second line. Anton Lundell centers Eetu Luostarinen and Jesper Boqvist on the third line. And it's Nico Sturm, AJ Greer, and Jonah Gadzovich on the fourth line. On defense, Seth Jones moves up to the top pair with Gustav Forsling, Nico Mikkola, and Dmitry Kulikov are the second pair, and Nate Schmidt and Uvis Balinskis. That's the third pair. The goalies right now: Sergei Bobrovsky and Vitek Vanacek. Again, Aaron Ekblad suspended. Brad Marchand is injured, and Matthew Tkachuk is on IR. So they are missing some key components. You got to hope that the Islanders play some of their bigger players, because they are in for a physical challenge against the Florida Panthers. I got to say this: the Islanders have to win at least one of these games to keep their slim playoff hopes alive. If you get 0 points this weekend, I think it's safe to say you start looking ahead full time to next season if you're not already doing so. Won't be easy. Let's see if this team has the heart to bounce back and get the job done. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. Saturday will be the 64th birthday of former Islanders defenseman Craig Ludwig. Ludwig, a native of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, a third-round pick of the Canadiens in 1980, spent 3 years at the University of North Dakota, joined the Habs in 1982-83, played for their Stanley Cup winning team in 86, joined the Islanders for the 90-91 season, had a goal and 9 points in 75 games with the Islanders, then played for the North Stars and the Dallas Stars, and won a cup again in his final season, 1998-99. Ludwig, not a big offensive guy, but boy, he could be physical and play solid defense. Only scored 38 goals and 222 points in his NHL career, but he played 1,256 games and had 1,437 penalty minutes, had 4 goals, 28 points in 177 playoff games. None of those with the Islanders. His best game as an Islander, February 24th, 1991. Islanders invade the Spectrum in Philadelphia. Jeff Hackett, the Islanders goalie, Ron Hextall, the goalie for Philadelphia. And with the Islanders and the Flyers all even at two, Derek Smith scores and gives a 4-2 lead to the Flyers. But late in the game, our Islanders' birthday of the day, Craig Ludwig, scores his first and only goal as an Islander. Brent Sutter gets the assist. That made it a 4-3 game, but that's as close as the Islanders got. In this game, Craig Ludwig had a goal. He was a +1. He had 4 shots on goal, and he had 4 penalty minutes. Jeff Hackett, 26 saves, but the Islanders fall in this game by a score of 4-3. But Craig Ludwig, a tough physical defenseman, is our Islanders' birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long, and I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. So join me for some instant insight and analysis, and it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.